Have you ever noticed trees? Imagine a world without trees. I don't think you can. Welcome, friend. In just a few moments, the screen will quietly fade to black. There is nowhere else to be, nothing to keep track of, no rules to follow, nothing to remember, and nothing to solve. Just a little while set aside for noticing things. Our journey begins. Trees are patient companions, not simply because they stand still, but because they quietly remain. The longer you spend with a tree, the more questions begin to appear. How many mornings has it welcomed? Did someone plant this tree? Or did it quietly find its own way here? How many storms has it weathered? How many birds have rested among its branches? Some trees grow beside quiet homes. Others stand at the edge of the sea. Some reach toward mountain skies. Others have watched centuries pass beneath their branches, or even millennia. There is something wonderfully mysterious about them. Perhaps the greatest secret a tree keeps is not how old it is or how tall it has grown, but everything it has quietly witnessed. What if, instead of us noticing the trees all along, they have been quietly noticing us? A gentle breeze finds its way into an ordinary neighborhood. It slips between familiar houses, past quiet gardens, across well-worn sidewalks, until it reaches an oak tree. An ordinary oak tree, standing behind an ordinary house in an ordinary neighborhood. You've probably passed a tree very much like it, perhaps hundreds or even thousands of times. Most people would simply call it a tree. The oak has never minded. It has had far more interesting things to notice. Long before the neighborhood begins to stir, the birds awaken first. Always the birds. Some return every year. Others stay only for a season. The oak welcomes them all. Many years ago, humans built a long white fence next to it. The oak never understood its purpose. Birds ignore it. Squirrels disregard it. Even the wind passes through without slowing down. Yet, humans seem to think it is very important. On this side of the fence, there are dogs. There have almost always been dogs. Different names, different paws, different barks, but always dogs. Every time a squirrel runs up the oak, the dogs race over barking. The squirrels race upward. The oak thinks, "This has never worked, not once." Across the fence, mornings are quieter. A back door opens. The young man steps onto a painted blue deck carrying a warm cup. Steam rises gently into the morning air. He stands quietly for a few moments before beginning his day. The oak rather enjoys these quiet mornings. The young woman appears soon afterwards, sometimes together, sometimes separately. Some mornings they leave in their cars. Other mornings, the young man walks away carrying a small pack. The oak has noticed that he always returns before night has completely settled. And on still other mornings, neither of them leaves at all. Instead, they sit outside with curious little glowing rectangles. Sometimes, they look into them silently or tap on them with their fingertips. Sometimes they speak to them. Sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they wave their hands while talking to people the oak cannot see. The oak has concluded the tiny glowing rectangles must contain very small people. Humans are endlessly fascinating. The oak remembers the day the young couple first arrived. They walked slowly around the yard. The young woman noticed flowers. The young man stood quietly on the deck, looking across the yard, looking toward the trees, looking at the oak. The oak quietly decided, "I think I shall like these two." Since then, every spring, little gardens appear on the deck, not in the ground, but in boxes and pots. The oak has never quite understood this. Tiny herbs, peppers, tomatoes, even lettuce. Humans seem remarkably creative about finding places for plants to grow. The tomato receives the brightest sunshine. The oak could easily cast shade over the little plant, but it chooses not to. The tomato seems happiest in the light. The oak has learned. Helping sometimes means standing back. Every now and then, a fine little net appears around the tomato. The oak cannot imagine the purpose of the net. Are the humans protecting the tomato from something dangerous? Or is everyone else being protected from the tomato? Every week, the young man cuts the grass. Every week, it grows back. He cuts it again. It grows back again. This appears to happen throughout the neighborhood, the oak has concluded. Grass must be very important to receive this amount of attention. Sometimes, the young man stands in the yard holding several shiny metal sticks. He swings them carefully through the air. Occasionally, a little white ball appears, and the young man attempts to strike it with the metal sticks. Whatever the purpose is, the young man seems determined to become better at it. The oak rather admires that. Autumn arrives as expected. The oak works very hard all year preparing its leaves, each one carefully made, each one released at just the right moment. The squirrels seem delighted. The young man, not so much. He spends many afternoons gathering the leaves into great piles. The oak has often wondered why he is collecting them. The squirrels have wondered too. It is one of life's great mysteries. Every year, the oak grows just a little more, a little taller, a little wider, just enough to reach a little farther across the fence. Not quite there yet. Perhaps next summer. Trees are very good at waiting. The oak has watched many families. Some stayed only a little while. Others stayed much longer. One family built a little house among its branches. Children climbed there almost every afternoon. They whispered, laughed, invented impossible adventures. The oak never understood the games, only that the children seemed happiest when they climbed into its arms. The oak rather enjoyed those days. The little house is quiet now. These days, there are mostly dogs, and they seldom look up. But across the fence, tomatoes appear every spring. Little gardens grow in curious boxes. Coffee steams in the morning. Tiny glowing rectangles fill with invisible people. Strange metal sticks are swung through the air. Every season, there is something new to notice. And for now, the oak finds itself looking across the little white fence, because that's where the new stories are. The breeze resumes its journey through the neighborhood, slowly making its way towards the sea. The breeze wanders over rivers, across marshes. The air begins to taste faintly of salt. The sea has been waiting. The breeze drifts lower until it brushes through the leaves of a mangrove. One ordinary mangrove, growing where the land and the sea have never quite decided which one belongs there. The mangrove rather likes this arrangement. Twice each day the sea comes to visit. Twice each day it quietly leaves again. The mangrove has never considered this unusual. It has simply always been so. The tide arrives. Fish appear. The tide retreats. Tiny crabs hurry about their mysterious business. Then the sea returns. The mangrove has long suspected. The tide simply enjoys visiting. Morning begins with wings. White egrets, blue herons, brown pelicans. Some stay only a few moments, others linger much longer. The mangrove notices them all. Pelicans are especially curious creatures. They spend hours watching the water, then suddenly, without the slightest warning, they simply disappear, straight into it. The mangrove has watched this happen countless times. The birds seem equally comfortable in both worlds. The mangrove finds this to be remarkable. The mangrove is also comfortable in both worlds, but always simultaneously. Sometimes the pelicans leave the water carrying a fish. The mangrove wonders if the fish were expecting to fly that day. Sea turtles arrive quietly. They never seem to be in a hurry. The mangrove admires that. Sometimes dolphins pass beyond the roots, always together, always cheerful. The mangrove has never heard one complain. The crabs are another matter entirely. They always seem to be terribly busy. The mangrove has never discovered exactly what requires such urgency. But whatever it is, it appears very important. Every creature seems to know exactly where it belongs. The birds belong to the sky, mostly. The fish belong to the water, mostly. The crabs belong wherever crabs decide they belong. The dolphins belong to one another. It's a simple world, a peaceful world, mostly. Occasionally, far beyond the shallow water, something enormous appears. The mangrove has watched them for as long as it can remember. Great floating things. Islands? No, islands don't swim or float. Fish? No, not fish. They never dive below water. Birds? No, not birds. The mangrove has never seen one fly. They definitely seem too large for flying. Turtles? Ridiculous. Sometimes one glides past, sometimes several, always following the same invisible path across the horizon. The mangrove has often wondered what sort of creatures they might be. Perhaps they are enormous sea creatures. But then, birds land upon them, quite comfortably, which would seem rather impolite if they were alive. Perhaps the birds own them. This seems like an excellent explanation. Except, the birds never stayed very long. Sometimes dolphins would swim with the floating things. Perhaps the dolphins were guiding the creatures somewhere. The mangrove decided whatever those curious floating things were would probably remain one of life's great mysteries. It never occurred to the mangrove to go looking. After all, the sea comes to visit every day. Why should anyone need to go search for more? When the whole world eventually comes to you, time passes, tides come, tides go, little fish, crabs, birds, curious floating giants. The mangrove notices them all. Storms come, storms go. The tide never forgets. Neither does the mangrove. Then the breeze returns, not quietly this time. The air feels heavier. The birds leave first. The dolphins disappear beneath the water. Even the little crabs seem to know. The sea begins to breathe differently. The mangrove has felt this before, many times. Then the wind arrives, not as a visitor, but as a force. The mangrove bends, but does not break. It has weathered many such days. It knows even the fiercest winds eventually grow tired. And when they do, the mangrove will still be there with the same familiar creatures, watching and waiting, because it knows the next tide will be returning soon, as it always does. Eventually, the wind resumes its journey. The wind arrives, as it always does. It climbs a mountainside, then crosses a valley, and another, until it reaches a pine tree. Not just any pine tree, the tallest pine tree upon the ridge, the oldest tree upon the ridge. The first to greet the morning, the last to watch the evening fade, the first to greet an old friend. The pine has been waiting, not because it expected the wind. The wind always comes. The pine simply wonders, where has it been all this time? Today, as the wind finds the pine, it eases and becomes a light breeze, then gently slips through the thousands of green needles. Each one answers with a quiet whisper. The pine has always enjoyed these conversations. The breeze never stays long enough to answer questions. It simply arrives, whispers of worlds beyond, then continues on. The pine has often wondered, what mountains lie beyond these mountains? What valleys lie beyond this valley? What forests stretch beyond the farthest ridge, just beyond its view? It has never seen them, but the wind has. The pine has stood here longer than the younger pines below, long enough to watch tiny saplings become towering trees, long enough to greet generations of owls, foxes, bears, long enough to know that almost everything leaves eventually, and almost everything returns. Sometimes a bright traveler appears in the night sky. At first it is only a tiny point of light, but night after night it grows brighter. Its long silver tail stretches farther across the stars. For weeks it quietly shines its light across the mountain. The younger pines whisper, "What is that? Has it always been there? Is it getting closer? Should we do something?" The pine never worries. Centuries ago, it had stopped wondering. The pine knew. Long after this generation had passed, and the next, the bright traveler would return again. And then a new generation of young pines would ask the very same questions. Eventually, the younger pines slowly stop talking about it. The wind returns. The mountain grows quiet again. The pine knows this mountain and the broad valley below, the winding river that glimmers in the afternoon sun, great stands of evergreen stretching toward distant ridges, granite boulders resting quietly among patches of moss. In spring, tiny wildflowers appear where the snow once lingered. By summer, blueberries hide beneath low shrubs. Autumn brings cool mornings. Winter returns with deep, quiet snow. The mountain is always changing, yet somehow it always feels the same. The pine knows the sky intimately. After all, the pine is closer to the sky than any living thing around it. It greets the first light of morning. It notices storms while they are still only distant thoughts beyond the mountains. It watches clouds gather, eagles soar, stars appear. The moon rises and sets. Sometimes, the valleys below disappear beneath a sea of clouds. Only the mountain peaks remain. The pine has always liked those mornings. The mountains become islands, and the sky becomes an ocean. The pine has never seen an ocean, but the wind whispers about faraway wonders. Like mountains made of sand, endless water, cities. The wind has seen it all. The pine can only dream of such things. Many visitors pass this way. Red squirrels chatter endlessly among the branches. Chipmunks scamper across the stones. Bears lumber through the forest below. Deer pause beneath the lower branches. The owl has made its nest in the pine. It is not the first home built in its branches. It surely will not be the last. The owl spends its days roosting in the pine. But at night, the owl comes alive. Sometimes the pine watches the owl hunt, soaring silently across the valley, searching for its next meal. Far across the valley, near the shoulder of a distant mountain, every clear night, a tiny blue light shines, always in the exact same place. Clouds sometimes hide it, snow sometimes shields it, but the pine never believed the little blue light was gone, only hidden. The owl has flown in that direction. The fox has often disappeared that way. Even the wind passes that way from time to time. The pine has begun to suspect, perhaps, they all know the secret of the blue light, or perhaps they all wonder as well. The pine has decided it's one of life's great mysteries. It simply watches, listens, and waits for the wind to return again, and wonders what marvelous things the wind is seeing now. The winter wind brings the cold with it, across fields, over quiet fences, and into carefully planned rows of apple trees. Each row is different from the next. Honeycrisps, galas, Fujis, pink ladies, Granny Smiths. Together they are simply the orchard. Now the last leaves loosen, and one by one drop to the ground. The last apples have been gathered. The branches are still. The orchard settles into its winter rest. The wind isn't ending the year. It is just gently closing one chapter, so another can begin. Soon, footsteps crunch softly along the frozen ground. The man has arrived. Every winter, before anyone else begins thinking about spring, the man walks the orchard, row by row, tree by tree. Good morning, galas. You had a wonderful year. Morning, Honeycrisps. You've outdone yourselves this year. Good morning, ladies. Still holding on to a few, I see. The man carries a pair of well-worn pruning shears. Not to make the trees smaller, but to help them grow. A branch that has grown too crowded is carefully removed. When spring arrives, sunlight will need room to reach every blossom. Another limb damaged by last summer's storms is gently trimmed away. The man works slowly, never rushing. Every cut is made with spring already in mind. Fallen leaves are gathered. Forgotten apples are quietly collected from the ground. Broken ties are replaced. Young trees are checked, especially the young Honeycrisps. They need just a little extra helping hand. Nothing is hurried. Winter is the season for preparing. But then, the snow begins to melt. Tiny streams find their way between the rows. The frozen ground slowly softens. There is warmth in the afternoon sunlight now. Crocuses appear, almost before anyone expects them. And then come the daffodils, followed by the tulips, bright little reminders that winter never stays forever. But now, even the wind seems to know spring has begun. Each morning, it notices something new. The buds have grown just a little larger. The orchard is waking. All winter, new life has been waiting inside each tiny bud. Then, row by row, the galas are among the first to stir. The green tips appear almost overnight. Nearby, the honeycrisps are beginning to wake. The Fugees aren't far behind, then the Granny Smiths quietly join in. Soon every row is changing. Every morning looks just a little different than the one before. One morning, the first pink blossoms appear, barely opened. By the next morning, there are more, and again the next, until the branches nearly disappear beneath clouds of blossoms. The orchard is wrapped in a soft pink and white blanket. Soon, the air begins to hum and the first bees arrive. They drift from blossom to blossom, never hurrying, never choosing favorites, visiting every row. The bees never notice where one variety ends and another begins. The orchard has always wondered if the bees realize just how much depends upon their tiny journeys. Soon the afternoons grow longer. Rain falls gently. Leaves unfurl. Shade gathers beneath every branch. Pink and white blossoms remain only a little while. One by one, their petals drift to the ground. The wind carries them gently between the rows like fallen snow. Where blossoms once covered every branch, tiny apples begin to appear. At first, no larger than marbles, easy to overlook, but growing a little more each day. The man walks the orchard every day now, this time not with pruning shears, but with careful eyes. Some of the tiny apples are gently removed, not because they have done anything wrong, simply to give others room to grow. The orchard understands. Sometimes growing well means letting go, so that what remains can become something even better. The days grow warmer still. The rain comes more often. The orchard drinks deeply. Leaves stretch toward the sunlight. By midsummer, the branches have become cool green umbrellas. Birds rest among the leaves. Children walking nearby search for shade beneath the trees. The wind still visits, but now it's a warm summer breeze. It carries the sweet scent of growing apples through the trees and over the gate. The rows no longer look alike. The first hints of color begin to appear. The galas, always eager, are the first to blush. The others watch quietly. Their turn will come. Each variety keeping its own quiet calendar. Every morning the orchard is just a little fuller than the day before. Then, almost without anyone noticing, summer begins to slip away. The mornings arrive a little cooler. Goldenrod appears beside country roads. Asters bloom in the quiet corners. The orchard has been waiting for this. The man smiles. So it begins. Ladders appear first, then families carrying baskets. Some have been coming here for generations. Parents lift little ones so tiny hands can reach their very first apple. Some children search carefully, certain that somewhere the perfect apple is waiting just for them. Others pick the first one they see. The orchard doesn't mind. Every apple has been growing towards this moment. Laughter drifts between the rows. Conversations rise and fall. The man watches quietly from nearby. There is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to prune, only something to witness. As the weeks pass, the honey crisps become crisp and sweet, as promised. The Fuji's continue ripening in the warm autumn sun. The Granny Smiths hold tightly to their bright green color. The pink ladies, patient as ever, wait just a little longer. Every variety arriving in its own perfect time. Gradually, the baskets become fewer. The laughter grows quieter. One afternoon, the final family waves goodbye. The orchard grows still. The man walks slowly between the rows, just as he did many months ago. Past the galas, the honey crisps, the Fuji's, the pink ladies, the Granny Smiths. He stops beside one tree, removes a glove, and simply rests a hand against its trunk. No words are needed. The orchard understands. The first leaf lets go. Then another. The branches slowly become bare once more. The winter wind has returned. The man closes the gate behind him. The orchard settles into its winter rest. It never has understood where the man goes when he leaves the orchard, just that he always returns. It is one of life's great mysteries. Meanwhile, deep inside every tiny bud, another spring is already waiting. The wind meandered through the mountains, looking for an old friend. When they first met, the giant was not very large at all. Just a seed, smaller than a human fingernail. Now, it rose above the forest, a giant among giants. Nearly 300 feet tall, taller than a 30-story building. The giant could see farther than almost anyone else. The morning sunlight spilling slowly across distant mountain ridges. Storms gathering long before they arrived. Snow settling on peaks many miles away. Its roots reached only a little way into the earth. Instead, they stretched quietly outward, finding the roots of other giants, holding one another beneath the forest floor. Most visitors assumed the giant spent its days looking out across the mountains. But that wasn't true. The giant rarely looked far away. There was simply too much happening much closer. Some afternoons, children wandered through the forest. One would stop, place both hands against the giant's enormous trunk, and look up. The giant always wondered, what were they hoping to see? Occasionally, one of the quieter forest residents passed silently beneath its branches. Not a human, not a bear, something else. Humans seemed endlessly fascinated by them. The giant had always found that rather curious. They had simply always been there. An ant struggled past, carrying a pine needle many times heavier than itself. The giant had often wondered what it feels like to carry something as heavy as itself. And what did the ant think was tiny? One morning, full-grown mushrooms appeared where there had been nothing the evening before. The giant had never understood how anyone could accomplish so much overnight. After all, it had taken the giant thousands of years to reach this size. Sometimes, a hummingbird hovered, perfectly still beside a cluster of wildflowers. The giant watched and wondered what it might be like to leave the ground, even once. After a gentle rain, moss reached across an old stone, so quietly that no one noticed it growing. Except the giant noticed and wondered, why did the moss choose that particular stone? What exactly made that stone attractive to the moss? Was the moss satisfied with its choice? Did the stone mind? Sometimes moss grew on the giant. After all, its bark was nearly 2 feet thick, strong enough to protect it from the fires that had visited these mountains for thousands of years. Plenty of room there for a little patch of moss. One quiet morning, a tiny spider began building a new web between 2 folds of the giant's bark. The giant always enjoyed these mornings. The first thread. That one always seemed the hardest. Yes, that looked promising. A sensible choice. The giant had seen enough webs to know which branches made good anchors. Then, perhaps not that one. The morning breeze was just a little stronger there, and that strand looked a little too long. The giant found itself quietly rooting for the spider, and quietly hoped that strand would hold. It probably would. The spiders always seemed to know something the giant did not. Somehow, it always worked. The giant was certain that by paying careful attention, the secrets of web building would be revealed. There was, after all, plenty of time, but for now, it was still one of life's greatest mysteries. Perhaps that is what being a giant really meant. Not seeing farther than everyone else, but discovering that the smallest lives often carried the greatest wonders. The wind searched for its smallest friend. Long before the bonsai rested in the quiet garden of an old temple, it lived among hundreds of other tiny trees, each one growing patiently in its own little pot. Some were only a few years old. Others had already watched many decades pass. Some stood perfectly straight. Some carried tiny flowers or fragrant pine needles. The little bonsai loved its home and all of its friends. It knew who everyone was. People would come into the nursery. They wandered slowly between the benches. Sometimes they smiled. Sometimes they paused. Sometimes they simply admired before quietly moving on. Sometimes they would take one of the bonsai's friends away with them. The bonsai believed the nursery, with these rows of tiny trees, was the whole world, and wondered, where did the people come from, and where did they take his friends? It was certainly one of life's great mysteries. Then one morning, someone stopped in front of the little bonsai. Not for a moment, for a long while. And then gentle hands lifted the little pot and carried it away. The bonsai looked back as rows of familiar trees slowly disappeared. Some seemed almost to wave goodbye. Others simply watched. The nursery grew smaller with every step. The bonsai was about to solve the mystery of where his friends had gone. Soon the nursery disappeared. The bonsai expected the world to be more nursery. Instead, it found the sky. Not a small patch between wooden beams, not sunlight filtered through a roof, but an endless blue ceiling with no walls at all. The bonsai wondered how anything could possibly fit beneath it. And then the world began to move. The little tree had never traveled before. The people called it a car. The bonsai simply believed the whole world had suddenly started rolling past. Fields, hills, little streams, barns, birds, but most surprisingly, everywhere there were trees. Not tiny trees resting quietly in little pots, great trees, towering trees, trees so enormous that the bonsai could scarcely believe that they were trees at all. It wondered how anyone managed to fit them into a car. Perhaps they arrived as tiny bonsai long ago and simply forgot to stop growing. The bonsai watched forest after forest slip quietly past. Some trees stood alone. Others gathered together like old friends. Some grew beside rivers. Some on rocky hillsides. Some reached so high they almost seemed to touch the clouds. The bonsai had never imagined there could be so many ways to be a tree. It also wondered, what happened to all of the pots? Surely the pots were not buried beneath the trees. It was a new mystery to solve. As the afternoon faded, the car finally became still. Gentle hands lifted the little pot once again. The bonsai looked around. There were no long rows of tiny companions, no nursery benches, no familiar faces, only an old stone path, a quiet garden, and beyond them, an ancient temple. The bonsai had discovered what it was like to go home. Long before you see the palm, you often hear it. Not the trunk, not the coconuts, the fronds, long green ribbons moving with the wind, not rustling like maple leaves, not whispering like pines. The palm speaks in long, unhurried waves, as though the breeze itself has learned to sing. Perhaps that's because the palm lives where the two worlds meet, where the land ends and the sea begins. Few trees choose such a place. The sand and salt make it unwelcome for most trees, but the palm seems perfectly at home. Storms arrive without invitation, yet the palm has learned something many trees never do. When the wind grows stronger, it does not argue, it simply bends. Then, when the storm has gone, it quietly stands again. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. Every morning the palm watches the beach awaken. The tide leaves behind shells, seaweed, pieces of driftwood, tiny treasures carried here by the sea. Birds arrive. Crabs leave curious little footprints. The waves begin another conversation with the shore. Then, off in the distance, at first just a speck, the girl, always carrying the same little basket. She walks slowly, not because she is tired, because she is looking. She notices things other people walk past. A smooth stone, a perfect shell, a piece of sea glass polished by years of patient waves. Sometimes, something so tiny, only she seems to see it. The palm watches from above. The girl walks the beach, notices things, and puts them in the basket. Eventually, the girl comes to rest in the shade of the palm. She sits on the warm sand. Then, one by one, she lifts each treasure from her basket, turning it slowly in her hands, studying it. The palm is equally fascinated with each treasure, and wonders why the girl chose each piece. Sometimes, the palm plays a little game and tries to predict which treasure the girl will notice next and put in her basket. The palm sometimes gets it right, and sometimes not. Days become weeks. Weeks become seasons. The palm begins to expect her. Each morning it waits. Some days she does not come. When dark clouds gather, the wind grows restless, and rain falls across the sea. The beach remains empty. The palm waits. It does not understand why the girl does not come on some days, stormy days. It only knows it is one of life's great mysteries. The next morning the sun returns, and so does the girl. The basket swings gently beside her. Everything feels right again. High above, small green coconuts continue to grow. One day they will be ready. Some will fall into the sea. The waves will carry them away, perhaps to another island, perhaps to another shore, perhaps to a place where another palm has never grown before. The palm has always believed that this is what coconuts are meant to do: to travel, to begin new stories. Yet one quiet morning, as the girl sits in the shade of the palm, studying another collection of tiny treasures, the palm has a different thought. Perhaps not every journey begins upon the sea. A single coconut loosens, not by accident, and is let go. The coconut lands softly on the sand nearby. The girl notices it and looks up. She smiles. She brushes away the sand and lifts it with both hands. It is heavier than everything else in her basket, and larger. She turns it slowly, just as she does with every shell, every feather, every smooth stone. Carefully, she makes room inside the basket and places the coconut among the day's other treasures. The palm watches as she walks away. The basket swings just a little more than usual. The waves continue their endless conversation. The breeze returns. The fronds begin singing once again. And for the very first time, the palm thinks that perhaps finding someone who truly notices is every bit as wonderful as finding another shore. The wind finds its way into a park. Not a big city park, not a small town park, just a park. A park with paths and benches and swing sets. Not every tree dreams of becoming the tallest or the oldest. Some simply hope to be noticed. The park tree stands behind a winding path, where people pass beneath its branches every single day. The park is busy. People walk their dogs, ride bicycles, jog or run along winding paths. Children race toward the swings. Parents gently push them higher and higher. Older couples sit quietly on nearby benches. Some feed the birds. Others simply watch the world go by. The park tree notices them all. It wonders where they are going and where they have been. Sometimes it wishes they would notice it. Lately, the park tree has observed that many people walk or sit looking down. Each carries a curious little object. Sometimes they touch it. Sometimes they smile at it, or even talk to it. Sometimes they never look up at all. The park tree has never understood what these little objects are, or why they are so interesting. They do not seem interesting. The park tree has decided this is one of life's great mysteries. One morning, something begins to change. Tiny buds appear, unnoticed at first. Quietly, they grow, until suddenly, one spring day, the park tree awakens in clouds of blossoms. Soft pink, gentle white, thousands upon thousands of flowers. Suddenly, the park seems different. People slow down. Children point toward the branches. Smiles appear. The park tree notices that far more people are looking up. Some stop beneath the blossoms. They even lift the curious little objects toward the branches. The park tree has never understood what they're doing. It only knows people seem very happy. Others arrive carrying wooden stands, stretched cloth, and little boxes filled with colors. They look at the park tree, then the cloth, then the park tree again, sometimes for hours. The park tree noticed the colors slowly appear upon the cloth, and people gazing at its canopy, and thought, no one has ever looked at it for quite so long. One afternoon, two people arrive holding hands. They walk slowly beneath the blossoms. After a while, the young man unexpectedly kneels before the young woman and offers her a tiny box with a shiny object. She covers her face and begins to cry. A moment later, they are both laughing. Soon, they are surrounded by smiling strangers, holding up their curious little objects. The park tree has never understood what happened that afternoon. It only knows everyone seemed unexpectedly happy. For many days, the blossoms remain. Then, one by one, like a gentle snowfall, they begin to drift away, floating softly through the spring air, landing upon benches, footpaths, children's shoulders, the backs of dogs, and then the branches are green once more. The painters are gone. The crowds grow smaller. People hurry through the park again. Many look back down at the curious little objects. The park tree does not mind. It has learned that every spring there comes a brief moment when people remember to look up, and perhaps for a flowering tree, that is enough. The wind winds its way through tall buildings and busy streets. Not every tree grows in quiet places. Some grow where the sidewalks never sleep, and where their nearest neighbors are made of steel and glass. Morning arrives with delivery trucks, taxi horns, buses, people hurrying towards places the maple will never know or care about. Dogs stop beside its trunk. Children skip past. Someone always seems to be running late. The maple has become quite accustomed to a noisy life. High above the sidewalk stood an elegant apartment building. Tall windows, stone balconies, graceful archways. Everything about the building seemed calm, almost peaceful. The maple often wondered what it must be like inside. Every morning, the maple noticed a window, and in that window, a cat. Not a typical cat, not like the cats outside, but an exceptionally fluffy cat with a magnificent tail and a round, flat face and tiny little nose. The maple tree wondered if the cat had fallen on its face when it was a kitten. The cat seemed to live a wonderfully orderly life. Morning sunlight, a comfortable chair, fresh flowers, afternoon naps, evening lamps. Everything appeared to happen at almost exactly the same time every day. The maple admired this. Its own life was rather less predictable. Rain arrived unexpectedly. Wind shook its branches without warning. Snow covered its limbs. Construction rattled the sidewalk. Garbage trucks arrived before sunrise, or worse, didn't arrive at all. Street sweepers followed behind. The city never seemed to sit still. The maple noticed other cats as well, like the alley cat. Quick, watchful, independent. He slipped between parked cars, balanced upon fences, disappeared into places only alley cats seemed to know. The maple understood that some cats lived outside, but not the cat in the window. Day after day, year after year. The apartment cat never came outside. The maple began to worry. Perhaps the poor fellow wasn't well. Why else didn't this cat come outside? Maybe it was permanently injured from falling on its face. This was certainly one of life's great mysteries. The maple wished there was something it could do to help. Summer passed. The days grew shorter. Evenings became cooler. The maple felt something changing. Deep within its branches, this year, everything seemed just right. Bright days, cool nights, gentle breezes, the right amount of rain. The maple had an idea. If the cat could not come outside, then perhaps the outside could come to him. One morning, a single leaf turned red, then another, and another, until almost overnight, the maple burst into color. Scarlet, crimson, orange, gold. Every leaf seemed intent on outshining the one beside it. The maple was determined to put on the most magnificent show of its entire life. And so this year, the maple created a symphony of color, a masterpiece, absolute perfection. The entire street slowed down. People stopped and pointed upward. They lifted curious little objects toward the branches. The maple hardly noticed. This performance wasn't for them. It was for one particular window. A very special audience of one. Slowly, the apartment cat rose from his favorite chair. He stepped onto the windowsill, sat down, and looked for a very long time. The maple could hardly believe it. At last, the cat had noticed. The apartment cat blinked, yawned. He considered the stunning display before him. Then he turned once, twice, and settled comfortably into a patch of sunlight. The maple imagined the cat was feeling better already, and was quite pleased with itself. The apartment cat thought the tree had finally arranged itself properly. He would now expect this level of excellence every autumn. Winter arrived. The brilliant colors faded. One by one, the leaves drifted away. Soon, only graceful branches reached toward the sky. The maple wondered whether the cat might forget. But the next morning, there he was. The same window, the same chair, watching quietly just as before. And the maple understood something it had never known. The cat had never been watching the colors. He had been watching the tree. Perhaps that is all any tree has ever really hoped for. Simply to be noticed. The winter wind blew through the city streets and eventually over mountains, across valleys, until it found its way once again into a quiet neighborhood with a curious oak tree that watched and waited to see what interesting things the young man and woman would do next.